everyone, it's Katrina. Number 8. Russian Atlantis. Did you know that Russia has its very own version of Atlantis? Submerged deep within the darkest depths of Russia's Lake Svetloyar, there is said to be a sunken city. The legend can be traced to the earliest days of the Kingdom of Rus, with its first written reference being in the 1780s. According to the Kitezh Chronicle, a great shining city was founded by Grand Prince Georgy of Vladimir on the banks of the Volga River. The city was called Lesser Kitezh. Years later, the Grand Prince found a second location that he thought would be perfect for an even bigger and more impressive city. This was on the shores of Lake Svetloyar. The city was called Greater Kitezh. The mysterious chronicle goes on to say that the city was built with monumental churches. There were fantastic monasteries and luxurious palaces. The city had towering statues and some of the greatest marvels of Eastern Europe. There was a great wall and trench to protect the city, but it didn't protect the people of Greater Kitezh from absolute destruction. In the year 1238, the Mongols brought terror to the city, led by Batu Khan. The Mongols had heard stories of the mythical city and its unprecedented wealth. First, the Mongols arrived in Lesser Kitezh, destroying it easily. The forces of Grand Prince Georgy retreated to Greater Kitezh. What happened next was so outrageous that many historians don't even think it happened. Keep in mind this account is based solely on a chronicle written by an obscure faction of Christianity known as the Old Believers. These people split from the Russian Orthodox Church around 1666 because of new reforms they didn't believe in. There is no name for who wrote the chronicle, but researchers are sure it was the Old Believers. The chronicle says that when the Mongols reached Greater Kitezh, it was gone. The prince had reached out to God, who agreed to hide the holy city within the lake. When the Mongols arrived, all they could see was water and forest. But after that, the city was never seen again. Not by anyone. The ruins of the city have never been found inside the lake. There have been expeditions like the one in 2011. Archaeologists looked for the remains of any ancient settlement around Lake Svetloyar. Amazingly, they did find fragments of pottery and of small villages. The team thinks the city of Greater Kitezh could be at the bottom of the lake, buried under 800 years of sediment. But how it got there is a baffling mystery. And now for number 7. But first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a huge thank you to Versatile Design and your lovely wife for supporting this channel. Thanks to you both! If you are new here, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing discoveries. Number 7. Lost munitions. Archaeologists recently discovered lost munitions from the First Sino-Japanese War off the east coast of China. Researchers were investigating the wreckage of a ship that fought during the first major war between Japan and China. It was waged between 1894 and 1895. The wreckage revealed over 200 relics, including things like wooden components from the ship's body, random mattresses, and everyday items. The ship, named Jingyuan, had been blown to bits. Among the relics, experts identified 37mm Krupp shells. They found tons of these ancient shells, which would be used to defend China from the Japanese Navy. Experts think the ship was part of the Beiyang fleet. The fleet was positioned off the coast of China to protect their shores from Japanese attack. Many of these spent shell casings were likely part of a counterattack in which gunners blasted Japanese ships. The Jingyuan was discovered buried under about 6 feet of mud on the sea floor. It's an interesting piece of history that shows just how close China and the UK were a century ago. Historical records show that the Chinese government ordered the Jingyuan be built by the Armstrong shipyard in the UK. It was one of 2 dome-clad cruisers commissioned in 1886. The other ship was the Zhiyuan, which Chinese archaeologists discovered in 2015. The entire Beiyang fleet was decimated at the Battle of Weihai Wei. Between January 20th and February 12th, 1895, Japanese forces smashed the fleet into pieces. They landed in eastern Shandong and destroyed the Chinese sea forts. The Japanese took control of the area and were very close to performing a pincer attack against the capital of Beijing. But the Chinese sued for peace, fearing the worst, and that was what brought the war to an end in 1895. Number 6. Stilt Village. Scientists think they may have just discovered one of the first permanent settlements in Europe. divers uncovered the ruins of a village built on stilts in the mud at the bottom of Lake Ohrid. Researchers identified the bones of the village and a perimeter defense of giant spikes. Now they are trying to figure out who may have built the village and why they defended themselves with countless rows of wooden stakes. Lake Ohrid, sometimes called the Pearl of the Balkans, is located in Albania. 8,000 years ago, the lake was significantly smaller. At the edge of its shores, there was a settlement of stilt houses. By stilt houses, I mean homes that were built on short wooden poles. This would have been ideal for an area prone to floods or somewhere with active predators. People lived a few feet off the ground in simple box-shaped homes. Scientists were able to radiocarbon date the material found at the village. It was constructed around 6000 BC, then destroyed 200 years later. The dating places it at several hundred years older than any other lake settlement in the area. Professor Albert Hafner from Switzerland's University of Bern called it the oldest settlement of its kind in Europe. That's a pretty big deal. Albert says the only villages that come close were built in the Italian Alps about 1,000 years later. They too were constructed on the edges of Neolithic lakes, later to be swallowed when the lakes got bigger. Albert and his colleagues have been studying the mysterious sunken village for 4 years. They believe it was home to around 500 people. The village was likely flooded annually, hence the stilts. The most recent discovery was also the most shocking. Archaeologists found thousands of spiked planks put together to form an impenetrable barricade. Albert said the sheer number of spikes suggests the villagers cut down an entire forest. It's hard to describe just how impressive this prehistoric fortification was. Researchers have estimated the villagers drove about 100,000 spikes into the ground around their settlement. This leads to a lot of unanswered questions. Why did they need such a grand defensive perimeter? Were they protecting themselves from rival tribes or creatures of the night? It is a baffling mystery, one that archaeologists might never solve. The waters of the lake rose and the mysterious villagers fled to parts unknown. Number 5. The monstrous isopod. A truly monstrous and horrid creature was recently discovered in the Gulf of Mexico. A yellow isopod at the bottom of the sea has now joined the 20 other confirmed species of Bathynomus alive today. The creepy yellow isopod is about a foot long, meaning it would take up the entirety of most people's forearms. It's directly related to crabs and shrimp and lobsters, but it's way creepier. An isopod is an unusual crustacean that has 11 spines. It's an aquatic creep with too many limbs and long dangling antennae. There are all different kinds of isopods and they vary greatly in size. Some of the smallest are no bigger than tiny ants, but the biggest is a foot long. The one just found is 2,500% bigger than a woodlouse from your garden. There are other enormous isopods in the ocean, but this one is particularly weird because of its yellow color. Number 4. Captain Morgan's ship. In 2011, archaeologists believed they discovered the wreckage of a ship in Panama. The ship was thought to belong to one of the most infamous pirate captains that ever terrorized the seven seas. According to the team of U.S. archaeologists involved in the discovery, the shipwreck was owned by Captain Henry Morgan. Yes, the creator of Captain Morgan rum. Captain Morgan was a very real historical figure. In the 17th century, he got his start in piracy as a privateer for the English crown. He was responsible for defending the crown's interests in the New World. This involved Captain Morgan fighting ships from other nations and stealing their loot. In 1671, Captain Morgan was part of an effort to capture Panama City from Spain. Out of all the colonial powers, Spain was the biggest thorn in the side of the English. The Spaniards had already conquered South America, and in the 1600s, they were taking hold of Central America and the Caribbean. Spain had a death grip on the region, which England desperately wanted to sever. Captain Morgan went after Castillo de San Lorenzo, a strategically placed Spanish fortress. It was a successful siege, but it came at a cost. Captain Morgan lost 5 of his ships during the assault. One of the ships lost was Morgan's flagship, the Satisfaction. The archaeologists were not able to confirm 100% which ship they found in Panama. Maybe it was Satisfaction, maybe one of the other 4. They were just excited that they at least found one of Morgan's ships. Fritz Hanselmann from Texas State University was the head of the dive team. He was hoping to find some rum in the shipwreck. Fritz and his team identified a series of unopened cargo boxes, along with treasure chests covered in crusty barnacles and pieces of coral. They were really hoping to find some of Captain Morgan's personal rum. But guess what? This all turned out to be wrong. 4 years after the discovery, researchers got a nasty surprise. They identified the shipwreck as being a Spanish merchant vessel named Nuestra Señora de Encarnación. They had told everyone that they found Captain Morgan's boat, but they didn't. The ship was part of Spain's Tierra Firma fleet, not Captain Morgan's attack fleet. It didn't even sink in battle. The Spanish vessel sank during a storm in 1681. Number 3. Underwater fire and giant eggs. Scientists were recently exploring an ancient volcano off Canada's Pacific coast when they made some startling discoveries. First, they found that the underwater volcano is still active, and second, they found it to be covered in thousands of giant eggs. Prior to the expedition, the team of scientists had thought it was dormant. The waters around the volcano were cold and quiet. Instead, they found a monstrous underwater mountain towering 3,600 feet above the ocean floor. The mountain was spewing warm water out of its mouth, meaning the volcano is very much active. Extinct volcanoes don't produce hot water. Thanks to the mineral-rich water being produced by the volcano, the entire area is home to an assortment of fantastic creatures. Warm water and healthy minerals are two of the most important things to create a blossoming marine environment. The minerals help microorganisms grow. The organisms attract bigger animals, and so goes the circle of life. Deep-sea marine biologist from Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Cherise Dupriez, called it a really special place on top of a really special place. The volcano is exciting because it's a sleeping atomic bomb waiting to blow apart Western Canada. The creatures living on its slopes are equally exciting. Researchers discovered the Pacific white skate laying eggs all over the summit of the volcano. They couldn't get an exact number, but they estimated there are anywhere between 100,000 and 1 million eggs. That's the scale at which sea creatures breed when they aren't being farmed from the ocean floor with giant nets. Pacific white skates are bizarre deep-sea monsters related to sharks and rays. Number 2. The Underwater Road. Archaeologists have discovered a road at the bottom of the sea in Croatia. Not just a road, but the ruins of structures from 7,000 years ago. According to researchers from the Archaeological Department at the University of Zadar, the structures were found 15 feet deep in the Bay of Gradina. That's on the western coast of Korčula, an ancient Croatian island. It looks like the sunken road may have once been used to link the edge of Korčula to an artificial island. In the year 5000 BC, the Croatian island was home to a culture known as the Hvar. They were Neolithic geniuses, though very little of their history remains. They had dominated this part of Europe, thriving from the bounty of the sea. They, for a reason nobody really knows, had a penchant for islands. They lived all across the northeast part of the Adriatic Sea on various islands and in hidden coves. Most of their settlements are currently at the bottom of the sea because of how much the waters have risen since the Neolithic era. There was something else the Hvar liked to do. They really enjoyed building artificial islands. They would pile stones extremely high in the sea, high enough that they poked out of the water. Then they would cover the stones with enough soil to create an artificial island. It was an immense amount of work, with archaeologists baffled as to why they would go through with such a project. The sunken road was used to connect one of these islands with a village on the mainland. It was made of stacked stones with a width of about 12 feet. Though once used to walk across water, it's now buried under the muck of the seabed. Number 1. The creepy strawberry. A team of scientists from Australia uncovered a new species of creepy creature during a research expedition near Antarctica. The new species has been dubbed the Antarctic strawberry feather. Researchers say the wacky animal looks like a feathery strawberry. It's a weird life form with 20 arms and a gnarly purplish skin color. This is the Antarctic feather star. Researchers characterize the organisms as having movements that are otherworldly in nature. There are a lot of these things on the bottom of the ocean in Antarctica. They live up to 3,800 feet deep. Some of their arms act as anchors, keeping them moored to the sea floor. At the end of each arm, which is really more of a tentacle than an arm, is a tiny claw. They dig their tentacles into the dirt like roots and hook into the ground using their tiny claws. Then their much longer tendrils are used to reach out for food. The result is an alien-like thing waving softly on the floor of the ocean. Strawberry feather stars look more like plants than animals, yet they are more closely related to things like starfish and sea cucumbers. What's your favorite creepy creature from the bottom of the sea? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and come back soon for more awesome videos. See you next time. Bye!